Okay, we're going to go over solving inequalities. Again, I just want you to have some notes on this, more examples on top of the video you should have watched this weekend. The first one's going to be pretty simple. There's no notes to print off, so you're just going to have to take your own notes on notebook paper. The first one's pretty simple. 5p plus 7 is greater than 6p. We need to solve for p. Right now, all we're doing is solving single variable inequalities so that we can graph it on a number line. If there's only one variable, that's when you're going to know to graph on a number line. If there's two variables, like y equals mx plus b, when we have that, we have like y equals 3x plus 4. That's when you know you're going to solve linear, which we haven't talked about. We'll talk more about next week. So we need to solve this one right now for p. Well, first thing I need to do is get my two p's together. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the smallest one. Well, the smallest one is 5. So I need to do the opposite. Subtract 5p from both sides. Okay, this is going to cancel out, leaving me with 7 is greater than 6 minus 5 is 1, which is p. Okay, so in this case right here, we're already done with our inequality. So this is our inequality. But again, if you remember what we talked about briefly in class today, we want to try to get our variable on the left side because it makes graphing easier. So when we put our variable on the left side, I'm just going to take p and put it over here, and 7 is going to go over here. I got to make sure I put my sign right. I can't just bring this sign down because that's going to change my answer. So I need to make sure the point is still pointing at the p and the open is still pointing at the 7. So 7 greater than p is the same thing as saying p is less than 7. So these are my solutions. Either one of those would be fine as far as writing the solution. But this makes it easier for when I want to graph it. Alright, so when I graph this, again, all I expect you to do whenever you don't have a number line given to you is draw your number line, take the number you solve for, drop down the 7. Now you need to determine what kind of circle you're going to have. An open circle, okay, an open circle, that means less than or greater than. Okay, so if your sign is a less than sign or a greater than sign, then you're going to have an open circle. Okay? If your sign is less than or equal to, then you're going to have a closed circle. So less than, slash, I'm just going to put slash greater than, but you also have or equal to. That's got to be part of your sign. So in this case, all I have is a less than sign. So p is less than 7, so I have to do an open circle. So I'm going to do my open circle on 7. And now if you remember the little trick I showed you in class, take your sign, okay, just pull it out and make you an arrow out of it. So if you make your arrow out of it, you can see that the arrow is pointing to the left. So that's the direction I want my graph to go. So when I draw my graph, it's going to go this way. And again, I know it's hard to see, so I'm just going to kind of color it in with a different color. All right, again, that's pretty simple inequality. We did these kind of like, we did some of these today on the bell ringer, so that wasn't too terribly difficult. All right? Let's look at our next example. Our next example is going to be negative 2/5 p is less than negative 14. And this is our dreaded fraction. I know you guys hate fractions, but you still have to know how to do them, so we need to keep practicing these. Okay, if I want to solve for p, in your calculator, you can divide both sides by negative 2/5. And it'll work for you. But when we're solving this on paper, because we have a fraction, we can't divide by a fraction. So what we need to do is we need to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So negative 5/2 times 2/5 p, and then on this side, negative 14 times negative 5/2. Okay, now, what's going to happen here is this is going to cancel and this is going to cancel. okay? Leaving me with P. And then over here, negative 14 times negative 5, 60, 65, 70, okay? So that becomes a positive 70 over 2. Now, I want to show you something here real quick. This is the one difference between solving inequalities and solving solving equations. Solving inequalities and solving equations only has one difference, and this is it right here. If I multiply across my sign by a negative, so here this is a negative 5 halves because this was negative 2/5. I multiply by negative 5 halves here, and I multiply by negative 5 halves here. If I multiply by a negative, I have to flip this sign. That means right now it's a less than sign. I'm going to have to turn it into a greater than sign. Again, if I multiply across, and it's actually, the rule is, if I multiply or divide across a negative sign, I have to flip my inequality sign. So here I flip my inequality sign. Now, I'm not done with this problem yet because 70 divided by 2 is actually 35. So P now is greater than 35. Now remember, it started off with less than. Okay? But the reality is I need P to be greater than 35. We're going to do an activity tomorrow that kind of explains this a little bit more. But the one rule change from solving equations to inequalities is the fact that if you multiply or divide across by a negative, you have to flip your inequality sign. Okay, so I did that. So here's my solution. P is greater than 35. And if I check my answer, and let's say I put a number that's greater than 35 is 36. If I do that in my calculator, let's say that I check this using P being 36. If P is 36, which is greater than 35, and I do it in my calculator, and I do negative 2/5 times 36, because that's a number that does satisfy this, okay? I end up with negative 14.4, okay? Or if I change this to a fraction, I end up with negative 70, well, let's just go with negative 14.4 so you can understand. So I end up checking this, I get negative 14.4. Is negative 14.4 less than negative 14? It is. I know it seems weird because the number's bigger, but remember, if you're going negative and you go backwards, the number is going to be bigger on the negative side, so that works. So now, if I want to graph this, again, I draw my number line, drop down my 35. This is why it's really convenient, so that I can just put 35 there. Okay, this is a greater than sign, not equal to, so I need to do an open circle, because it doesn't have the line underneath, so I do an open circle. Now, pull out your sign, make your little arrow. Which direction is your arrow pointing? It's pointing that direction. So my graph goes that direction. Okay? All right, one more example. All right, example 3. It's going to be a multi-step problem. So we're going to do negative 7b plus 19 is less than or equal to negative 16. Okay? Again, we solve this like any other equation. Start off by subtracting 19 from both sides. I subtract 19 from this side. This leaves you with negative 7b is less than or equal to 6 and 9 is 15. Carry the 1. Negative 35. Notice I did not switch the sign here. It didn't flip here because I subtracted from both sides. I didn't multiply by a negative. I didn't divide by a negative. So my sign stayed the same. Okay, now to continue solving this, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 7. This is going to cancel, leaving me with b. Because I divided by a negative, that's where my rule comes into play. I divided by a negative now, so I flip my sign and make it greater than or equal to negative 35 divided by negative 7 is positive 5. So b is greater than or equal to 5. Again, I had to flip my sign because the negative 7. I divided by negative 7. If you multiply or divide across the sign, then you flip it. Okay? Again, if I want to graph this, I drop my 5 down there because that's my solution. What kind of circle am I going to have now? Am I going to have an open or closed circle? Well, I have the line underneath now saying it's equal to. Since it's equal to, it's part of my solutions. Now I'm going to have a closed circle. Pull your inequality sign down. Draw it, make it into an arrow. Which direction is it pointing? It's pointing to the right. So, there's my graph. Going to the right. And again, that's pretty much it. We did a little bit of this on the bell ringer today. You saw this on the video from the weekend. So this is just a little extra notes that you can see just the notes itself without a lot of the explanation. And so you can see the work being worked out. Now I just want to write one other thing on the board for you to copy down. This is the one change. So I'm going to call this the change in solving inequalities. Okay, when you multiply or divide across the sign, you must flip the sign. Okay, that's the only change that you have. Please commit that to memory. More students make more mistakes on this than anything else. When you multiply or divide across the sign, you must flip the sign. Okay? Again, be ready to go over this again tomorrow. You need to make sure you watch this video. If you didn't watch the first one because it talks a little bit more about linear. It also talks about some key words. It shows you the signs. It breaks it down. It gives you a lot more information. Both of them are good. Okay? All right, see y'all tomorrow.